Welcome to another video. In today's video, we are going to discuss some of the myths of software development, as well as some tips and tricks to help you with your career choices. Now, this video will be relevant to anyone who might want to get into software development, someone who's planning on going to study software development, as well as someone who's in their early career in software development. If you are 7 years already experienced and you have a decent job, then this video might not be for you, but for the rest of you, stay tuned. This is going to be a fun one. I've been a software developer for over 11 years. In multiple franchises, I've gone from agricultural to insurance to financial, where I am currently. I'm in a senior position. I have my own team, manage multiple products, and I also have my own company called TB Tech, which does app development and software development. So today I'm going to take you through all the myths, some tips and tricks. But first, I think let's go make some coffee, have a quick breakfast, and then we can dive into it. One of the first myths that you hear when you start going into software development, whether it's high school or when you're already starting to study it, is that you're never going to struggle to find a job. That's not true. To give you an example, I have a friend, he studied with me, completed his software development course, and could not find a job for over 7 months. In that time, he actually had to go work for a company in networking. And only after working for that company for over 7 months, he actually got the opportunity to go work for a company which does software development, and that was the start of his career. So the first myth, you're going to get a job easy as your first job, not true. Once you get at least 1 year of experience, it becomes easier. After 3 years, even more easy. And then once you reach a senior position, which is normally around 5 to 7 years of experience, you will not struggle to find a job. So it is a very secure future career choice, but to get into it, that's difficult. The next myth is you can work anywhere in the world. That's true. Software development doesn't limit you to just a specific country. No matter where you studied software development, as soon as you've reached a couple of years of experience, people don't even ask anymore, where did you study? Do you have a degree or a certificate, which we'll get into later? They simply look at what languages can you do, what's your experience in the multiple languages, and then you can work all over the world. Because take a language like C#, for example. C# is the same no matter where you go in the world. They might use it differently, but overall the language stays the same. So that myth is 100% true. The next one might be a bit controversial, and depending on different countries, it might differ a bit, but the myth is you need to go to university to get a job. Now, unfortunately, in software development, that's not true. Whether you have a diploma, a certificate, a higher certificate, or a degree or a master's, and you can go on from there, it actually doesn't matter. It only matters for your first job. For your first job, because you don't have any working experience, they will normally ask, where did you study and what type of degree do you have? Now, take myself, for example. I have a higher certificate because I went to a technical college. I have friends that went to universities. We all end up in the same place, same salary, everything. So it actually doesn't matter. But if you have a degree from a university, you're more likely to get your first job easier. Now, with that said, there are pros and cons to each. For example, in South Africa, it's a trend where people that go to university, they are what we call book smart people. So they come out of university. You can ask them in interviews. You can go into depth. They can give you the definitions. They can say what's the difference between a clustered and a non-clustered SQL index and all that type of stuff. Where the guy that comes from college or a technicon normally will not understand or can give you the definition of that, but he might be able to give you an example. And some companies actually tend to hire people that come from technical colleges over people that come from universities. We've even had it in my team where we hired a guy. He aced his interview. He came from university. He had a degree and everything looked promising. And when it came to the practical part of coding, he actually lacked compared to someone else who struggled a bit in the interview, but we saw his practical knowledge is quite good. We hired him and instantly jumped in, got on top of everything, and worked your way up from there. Practical is always more important than theoretical. And that brings us perfectly to the next myth. You need a degree. Again, not true. Myself, I have a higher certificate and I'm in an extremely high position. I think for the last 2 career choices I've made, they haven't asked me, do I have a degree or anything like that? They actually just ask, what is your experience? There was one point, I think about 3-4 years into my career, I actually thought about taking my higher certificate and turning it into a degree. And I actually phoned one of the universities where I can do my degree. And they actually told me that my experience is worth more than my degree at this point. So doing my degree will be beneficial in the terms that I can say, yes, I have a degree instead of a higher certificate, but there will be no benefit inside a working environment. The same goes for Udemy. When I switched from the first job to my second job, I started doing Angular development, and I'd had no Angular experience before that. I had to teach myself on Udemy how to do it. I got a Udemy course in Angular and everything, got the certificates from there, and that was fine. That's the thing about software development. It's always evolving, and you can't go back to university to study a new language. You teach yourself, get some experience in it, and then you go from there. So a degree is not the most important thing in the world. So if you can only do a certificate, that's 100% fine. The next one is a juicy one. You will earn 6 figures when you start working. That's not true. You will not make over R1 million a year when you start out as an intern software developer or a graduate software developer. That sort of salaries only comes once you get to about 7 years of experience. You're in a senior position working for a massive company. Then earning over R1 million a year as a software developer is not uncommon. But that is one myth you need to understand, that you are going to start at the bottom, and depending on the size of the company and your position in the team, your salary is not what you think it's going to be. I know some people where they jumped out of university, they got internships at massive companies like BMW and so forth, and they earned amazing money, the same amount that like a 5-year experienced software developer will earn, but that is very slim chances. So more realistically, I started with 10,000 Rand a month, which is nothing. And I had to work my way up from there. A friend of mine started with 15, but he was in the city. Again, had to work his way up from there. So I'm not saying you're going to start with below 20, but don't expect 50 or 60,000 Rand as a starting salary when you begin your career as a software developer. Okay, let's move out of the office. The next myth is working from home. Getting a first job and working from home, again, is very, very rare. I work from home for the last 3 or 4 years, but my first job, I had an office job. I had to go to the office every single day. And the problem is, if you let people from start work from home, a lot of people are not disciplined enough. So you need to get some experience working in an office, see how the company works, see how everything inside an office environment works before you can actually start working from home. So don't expect your first job to be a 100% remote job unless you work for an international company. Now that brings us to tips. If you want to have a successful career in software development like I have, then what you need to do is have discipline. Some people, and we've actually let people go from our company and our team because of this, some people, they only like to work at night. But now what happens is you leave everything during the day, you do what you want, you leave all your work for later tonight because you say you work better at night. Now tonight you sit behind your computer, start working, but something comes up. Someone gets sick, there's an event, you have to go to something, and now suddenly you start getting behind. The real way to do it, and that's how I do it every single day, is you wake up, you finish everything you need to do for that specific day. After that, the rest of the day is yours. Now, depending on a company, like for us, we need to be by our computer from 8 to 5 every single day. So you can't just stand up and go do whatever you want to do. So it makes sense to do all your work in the morning so that if anything happens, you are covered. And that brings me perfectly to the next point. Let's go through some career choices, and then we can go into salaries from there. You have 3 choices when you become a software developer. You have back-end, front-end, and full stack. Myself, I am a full stack developer, but the salaries are very dependent on your type of developer that you are. So for example, if you decide on being a front-end developer, then your salary for a 5-year experienced front-end developer averages around 40 to 50,000 rand. It can go higher and it can go lower again, depending on the company. If you decide to be a back-end developer, they're normally 50 to 60,000 rand per month. And if you decide on a full stack developer, they're normally 60 to 70,000 rand a month. All of them now for a 5+ year experienced software developer. Now, which one should you be? Now, the type of developer you decide to be is very dependent on how your brain works. If you are more creative than logical, then becoming a front-end developer is definitely a good career choice. If you are more logical than creative, then back-end developer is 100% the type of developer you need to become. And if you're like me, I'm about 60% logical, 40% creative, then you can become a full-stack developer. And there are a lot of advantages. So I always encourage people, become a full-stack developer, because that means you can work in so many different languages. You have so many career opportunities, choices, and the salary is much better. For example, a company now needs to hire a front-end developer for 40,000 rand a month. They need to hire a back-end developer for 50,000 rand a month. That's 90,000 rand a month that they need to pay for 2 developers. Now what they can do is they can say, okay, instead of hiring 2 people for 90,000, let's hire 1 guy for 70,000 or 80,000. So that individual makes more money, but it's also a lot more work. So it is a very difficult career choice. You're always going to have to adapt. You're always going to have to learn, but it is 100% worth it. Now, while we're on the topic of full stack developer, here are some of the languages currently I think are some of the best. So for example, when I studied Java as my main language. I haven't used Java in the 11 years I've been a developer. The last time I used it was literally when I studied. Since then, I've been in C# for backend, which I would highly recommend. C# is used all over the world. And then you get some core technologies that you can use with them. So you can write all of this down. So EF core, migrations, database first approach, .NET, all of that is combined into C# to create the backend, the brains of the system. Then for the front end, I would recommend learning Angular and React. Those 2 are amazing. Most of the websites you go to today are either developed in React or Angular. And I think Angular is one of the best languages, and it's a really fun language to learn. Getting your head around some of the concepts in the beginning is difficult because Angular consists of 3 different languages. It's HTML, that's the front end. So that's the web page itself that you design with HTML. After that, you have CSS, cascading style sheets, which is basically the styling code for your HTML. And then the logic behind that page is written in TypeScript, which is basically JavaScript, just with a bit of conversions and to make it more user friendly. So that I would 100% recommend as a front end today. Then for database, because as a full stack, you're going to work with databases every single day, I would recommend SQL. Most companies use SQL. And even if a company like the company I work for now, they use Oracle, which is fine because Oracle and SQL are so similar that your queries basically is the same. So that is the languages I would recommend today. And my last tip before I let you go is be flexible. Sometimes you need to make a career choice, even if the salary is a bit lower, but you gain experience in a field that you never had. I would 100% recommend it. For example, I made a career choice at one point where I moved to a company where I had to learn Angular and I picked up some Angular experience. And if I did not do that, I would not be where I am today. So sometimes you have to make some sacrifices to make sure you end up exactly where you want to end up. So this is just some basic tips. If you guys want me to make more videos regarding software development, a day in the life of what my every day looks like as a working from home software developer, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. I'd love to answer them and I'd love to help as many people as I can. We can even go through stuff like your CV, and I'm just here to help you guys. So if there's anything you guys need, let me know. And until then, I will see you guys next week. Cheers.